Hot 97, Tariq, Nasheed. Welcome, man.
What's up, beloved? Looking beautiful.
Thank you. Thank
fly.
you. I have been following your work for a very long time, so I was really excited that you were coming out to New York, and I know you do your thing out here. So I was like, all right, we got to get him in here. We're going to talk some things. I've watched all Hidden Colors. We've been waiting for 4.
Yes, yes.
So the date?
May 26th in theaters all around the world.
How has it been able to get this big?
You know what? We got the academic community and we mixed it in with the hip hop community. That's why I use a lot of rappers in the Hidden Colors series.
Yeah, we've seen Nas and that. Yep.
Nas, KRS-One,
Yep.
David Banner, Killer Mike.
Yep.
So we mesh all of these communities together and we give out information that people have never seen and heard before. So
Right.
people gravitated towards it, and I'm real grateful for that.
Hidden Colors, to me, like, it's funny. It's like a gifting thing for me. I'm not kidding. I've bought it. I've gotten so many copies and sent them out. Like, literally was like, here, watch this.
Yeah.
Here, enjoy this. And I think it's really, really important. And it also breaks my heart that a lot of people don't know the information in the documentaries. And there's a lot of facts. It's not emotional.
Right, exactly. That's why I challenge anybody to say that something is inaccurate in the Hidden Colors film, because a lot of it is just straight history. We can document everything we're saying. And there's a reason why they don't tell us none of this stuff, because telling us our history and telling us some of the great things that African people and people of melanated descent have done historically, you know, they don't really want to empower us. So it's up to us to empower ourselves.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure you get a lot of heat for it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when it came out, did people truly try to challenge the history that you were saying? Or, I mean...
They wanted to, but then when they found out they couldn't really challenge what we were saying because we have so many references to verify it, they started to challenge the intent. So I would get a lot of people who would say, well, Tariq, your movies are going to make black people hate white people. And I would always tell them, not really, because all we're doing is talking about history. Right. So the actions of the races will make you hate the races, but we're not trying to teach anybody to hate nobody. We're just telling history from our point of view.
So what is going to be in Hidden Colors 4? I'm dying to know, because I've seen the trailer.
Yeah.
It was supposed to come out earlier, and I was going to send you a really mean message. No, I'm not kidding. I was like, where is Hidden Colors 4?
Yes, it's we took a little time to do it because we had to, you know, cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure everything was straight. And, you know, there's a lot that goes into the production of these movies because unlike regular narrative movies, documentaries, you have to get B-roll footage, you have to get the rights to certain images, and you got to go to museums. It's almost like doing a year-long term paper.
Wow.
Every day. So there's so much work that goes into it. So it's finally finished. Hidden Colors 4, we're going to talk about how the system of racism is almost like a religion.
Right.
How people operate as a, make it like a belief system, and they back their belief system up with action. So black people and people of color and melanated people, they need to understand that dynamic because we really still don't understand racism in this country.
Right. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding that you see when it comes to racism?
People think racism, the biggest misunderstanding, they think a person, if they're not beating you in the head, calling you the N-word or a negative racial epithet, that they're not a racist. And racism has refined itself to be more subtle because racism is systematic.
Right.
Meaning, if a person might not beat you in the head and call you the N-word, but if you are in court and that person's on the jury, they might vote to make you guilty even if they know that you're not guilty just for the allegiance of their race. So that's the kind of subtle racism that we have now.
Is it disappointing to you when people don't understand that?
It really is because, for example, Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Now, Hillary Clinton and her husband, Bill, they've done horrible things to black society with the crime bill in the 90s and the whole super predator narrative. They've done horrible things. And despite black people knowing that they've done horrible things, all Hillary has to do now is come around black people and do the nay-nay and the Millie Rock and show up at BET, and she can win us back over. We got to stop being politically and racially naive like that.
Why do you think that's the case?
Because it's all about acceptance. We've made acceptance of from the dominant society. We've put a value on that. That's almost more valuable than money, having a person in the dominant society pat us on the head and say, you're okay.
Yeah. You know, when I retweet that, I think Hillary Clinton is so corny for this.
Yes.
I really do. I cannot. And everyone's like, why? I'm like, it's too too long to explain, but it's just insulting.
It is.
I'm just not a fan of it. But now, when you look at voting, because I know you've spoken up and said that you don't believe in voting.
Yeah, right.
So
no, right.
let's explain that a little bit, because I think sometimes people can get really too judgmental on why you're not doing this, but you really have a valid point. What is it?
Voting. I have a don't vote campaign because voting has been refined to not work for black people the way we're doing it. Voting, if you're going to vote, I always say vote locally because you have more of a say-so.
Exactly.
Voting locally, you can get more done locally. But voting for a president now, unless you have an agenda and an economic base, it is absolutely pointless to vote for a president because other groups, they put together PACs and super PACs, and they put big money on politicians to have these politicians do their bidding. Like the gay community, for example, they raised millions of dollars and they gave it to Barack Obama. This is why he will talk specifically about gay issues, and Hillary will talk about gay issues. The Hispanic community, they know how to pool their resources together, create super PACs. I know Ava Longoria, she put together a lot of money with the super PAC and gave to Barack Obama and, and these other politicians. So they will specifically address Hispanic needs. But black people, we just think we show up and vote and that's it. We don't put together any super PACs, any type of money to fund politicians, or we don't have an agenda. We never say we as African Americans, we want this specifically done. We never do that, and nothing ever gets done. So voting for these people is absolutely useless unless you have an agenda and an economic base to fund that agenda. We've been taught to vote out of fear and tradition. We vote because, well, my grandmama voted, or my great-grandmama died for the right to vote. Well, they died for the right for you to not twerk every 5 minutes, but you do that. They died for the right for you to not be a knucklehead and commit crime. We do all types of silly stuff like that. So we have to be practical and not vote out of fear, because what we'll do, we'll say, we're going to vote so the other guy don't win.
Which is what is currently happening anyway, because everyone's scared that Trump's going to win.
We're scared of Trump, and we shouldn't be afraid of Trump because Trump is not going to do anything that's not being done now. Black people are being disenfranchised now. We're being gentrified now. We're being mass incarcerated now. We're being killed and lynched by race soldiers posing as cops now. So it's not going to get much worse after Trump.
What did you think about Bernie? I'm just curious, your thoughts on Bernie.
Bernie, you know, he says a lot of good stuff, but when it comes to actually doing something, he sounds like the rest of them. That's why I can't give him a pass either.
Do you think it's just because they don't have the resources, because they really aren't going to be able to do that? Because the president is just a face of really the politics behind them and the agenda.
When it comes to giving some to black people, all of a sudden everybody's patting their pockets. I don't know. Other groups of people in this country, they've gotten things from the government. They've gotten reparations. The Japanese community, they got reparations in the 1980s because of what happened to them in World War II. Different Native American tribes, they get forms of reparation. Jewish people, they get reparations from the United States. All of these different groups get forms of reparations, and when we talk about the people who have been disenfranchised the most by the government, because we couldn't get out of slavery because of the government, we had to deal with the system of Jim Crow that disenfranchised us economically because of the government. We get mass incarcerated, and that's backed up by the government, which is causing a disenfranchisement as far as the economics. So when we say these policies that hurt us specifically as black people should be corrected with resources allocated to us specifically, we get told, well, that's kind of divisive. You see how that trick bag works? So that's why I can't co-sign any of these people who are not going to try to allocate resources to the black community to help a community that has been disenfranchised year after year, decade after decade by the federal government.
To me, I'm not really sure why it's hard for people to understand. It's a very simple concept.
Absolutely. But part of the tradition of systematic racism is to make sure that black people don't have nothing. That's a tradition in this country. People judge progress by how little black people have. They will look at the scoreboard and say, okay, do we have more than black people? All right, we're doing good. So that's been a problem in this country, and black people are going to have to wake up and say, hey, we had enough of that. I don't believe in the whole naive white supremacist pitch, because we got this thing where you have a lot of people who act like they don't know what racism is, and then we have, and also let's be very clear, all white people are not racist, all white people are not white supremacists. Unfortunately, they put the racists and the white supremacists in charge of everything. The non-white supremacists, they never seem to be in the jury pools. The non-white supremacists, they never seem to be prosecutors in these cities where black people are getting shot. The non-white supremacists, they never seem to be in charge of the police unions that's allowing these cops to harm black people. The non-white supremacists, they're never in charge of the workers' unions, and these unions keep black workers out. So the white supremacists seem to always be in charge of everything, and I always see people say, well, I'm not racist, I'm not accusing you of being a racist, white person, but you've done nothing about the white supremacists who are.
So someone looking at the situation, they're like, well, why don't you just go back to Africa? How do you respond to that?
You respond to that in many ways. Number one, the white supremacists, they've already went over to Africa and dominated that. Africa is dominated by the white supremacists.
Yep.
I just left South Africa not too long ago. South Africa, you have a bunch of white people who are well-to-do and black people funneled into concentration camps called townships. These townships are concentration camps. They funnel these people in. They don't have any resources to get out, and they have a police presence there to lock them down. A few months ago, there was a big riot in one of these townships that the international community didn't even know about. So the black people are completely subjugated over there in South Africa. In other parts of Africa where there's not a lot of white populations there, they still control Africa through the economics, through the banking. So whenever any African country says, okay, well, we want to rid ourselves of the European influence and we want to be independent, all of a sudden, Western-backed terrorist groups show up like Boko Haram or Ebola, something like that shows up. Also, when black people did want to go to Africa, go back to the Marcus Garvey movement.
Right.
Black people wanted to go back to Africa. They said, hey, forget all this Jim Crow. We will go back to Africa. Well, the federal government here, they stopped the Marcus Garvey movement. They stopped the Back to Africa movement. They locked Garvey up. In the 1970s, when black people were looking to Africa to link up with them, the government here put out documents saying that they didn't want Africans and African Americans linking up with each other. Even now recently, in the last couple of years before Gaddafi died, Gaddafi wanted to give money to the African-American community.
Yeah.
He was working with Minister Farrakhan. I think he was going to give Farrakhan $5 billion. They stopped that. They wouldn't let Minister Farrakhan get that money. So they've always stopped black people from linking up with our African brothers. And then they say, well, why don't you go back to Africa? So it's that double-edged sword they do with us. They kick us in the back and say, hey, stop getting kicked in the back.
Mm-hmm. How do you, when you talk to other Africans, because I believe Africa as one continent, as one place, it's home, right?
Yes.
So how do you explain that? Because I think there's a serious issue when we are here and we try to divide one another. Oh, well, you're black, you're African American, you're separate than all the Africans. Where is this issue starting from, and where do you stand on that?
Oh, that goes back to systematic white supremacy. They've always exploited our beefs and tribalisms, and that's been a major problem of black people globally. We still hold on to these tribal differences, and they're dominating us as a group. See, people in the dominant white society, they can let go their tribal differences and work as one white bloc when it's convenient.
Right.
When there's a threat of another group empowering themselves over them. After they disempower this group, they can go back to being their divisive tribal sects. But at the end of the day, they will join together as one white unit. When European immigrants came over, you had people coming over from Italy, Germany, Greece. They had little divisive parts of town, especially out here in New York. You had gangs out here. The gang started in New York, but once they realized a lot of black people were moving north during that first Great Migration, all of these white groups started to form one block and went under the banner of white. So we have to understand, we have to empower ourselves under the banner of African black. I use the term melanoid.
Right.
Yeah, because I have a nonprofit organization called Melanoid Nation, and that encompasses all people who have been disenfranchised by white supremacy, all people of melanated descent. So whatever we call ourselves, it doesn't matter as long as we're empowering ourselves under that banner.
So talk to me about this movement. What exactly is it, so that people have a real understanding of what it means?
Yes, we have the Melanoid Nation movement, which means all people, if you have melanin and you are a person who's classified as non-white, most likely you're a victim of white supremacy.
Right.
And systematic white supremacy it dominates all areas of activity. So in order to counter that, you have to have a code of conduct within your melanated group. That doesn't mean you want to practice melanin supremacy. You want to replace the system of white supremacy with justice. So that's why we, as a melanated majority, because the majority of the world is melanated.
Right.
White people are less than 9% of the global population, but they control the planet. Why? Because they have a code of conduct. We don't have a code of conduct, and anyone who doesn't have a code of conduct, you will always be dominated.
What is their code of conduct?
A code of conduct means when people who are classified as white and who practice white supremacy, when they walk in a room and there's other white people there, through osmosis, they all know how to act and react to the people of color. For example, one code of conduct that we see, people classified as white will not side with a non-white against a white person. So whenever you see black people get shot by cops, you never see white people get on TV and condemn the white person who shot the cop. You never see that. Black people will get on television and they can co-opt us to throw other black people under the bus like it's crazy, like Jesse Lee Peterson, people like Larry Elder, people like that Sheriff Clark that's on Fox News. That's why we lose. It's too easy to co-opt one of us to throw other black people under the bus. And you don't even see that in the Asian community. Yeah. You didn't see any Asian people coming out speaking against Peter Liang, the Asian cop who shot the brother out here in New York. No Asian person did that. And even in the Hispanic community, they really don't throw other Hispanics under the bus for any other group. Nobody in the Hispanic community came out against George Zimmerman publicly after he killed Trayvon Martin. So we have to look at that. We're the only ones who will get on TV talking about, well, what about black on black crime? So we do that to our detriment.
What do you think about those type of personalities that are out there that constantly bring, anyone down?
That has gone on with us, with black people, since the 1600s. They had a law called the Meritorious Manumission Law that would reward black people for snitching on other black people, for turning runaway slaves in. So the first job black people had in America, outside of slavery wasn't a job. Job is something you get paid for. But the first job black people had under the colonies of the British was snitching on other black people. That was the first job. And that tradition has carried on to now. There's always been a reward for a black person to throw another black person under the bus. In one of these cities, there's a statue commemorating a black man who snitched on a white man named John Brown. Now, John Brown wanted to create a rebellion. He was a white guy who created a slave rebellion because he was one of the few white people who said, look, I don't agree with slavery, and I'm going to go out here and do something about it. Right. So he wanted to fight the government. It was a black guy who told on him. And they have a statue commemorating this black person. That just shows you how they will always give props to a black person who will go along with systematic white supremacy. And these people that we see on television, they're usually vetted. They don't put people on television unless they vet them and make sure they're going to do the bidding of white supremacy. That's why when you see these Fox News shows and CNN and the people get on there talking about what about black on black crime, I always point my finger at the white supremacists for allowing them to get on TV to do that, because there's people like me, and I've been on some of these shows before, but they cut my mic off right before I get to going in because they know I go in.
Yeah.
But they allow these people to do that. So we always have to keep that in mind.
Is there anyone that you want to have like a conversation with or a debate, or anyone you just like, I would love to talk to them and let them know, or like it could be very productive and just very educational. Is there anyone you feel that if you had a chance to talk to them, you feel like you could enlighten them?
Well, the thing is, I will debate anybody, any suspected white supremacist, anybody. The thing is, most of these conversations that they have when it comes to race, it's always in a controlled environment where nobody can debate them. So then it becomes propaganda. Like Fox News. Right. Fox News is a propaganda station. They know what they're saying is BS. You have a lot of these think tanks out here that get millions of dollars, and they come up with strategies, and they have media people connected to them and media personalities and authors connected to them, and they put out propaganda and things that will help push through certain legislation. Yeah. For example, when they had that whole knockout game propaganda, that was a totally false narrative. There was no knockout game that people were playing around the country. They put out stories saying that black kids are going around knocking white people out as part of a game. So they got a bunch of random videos that had nothing to do with each other, put them on television and said, this is part of a game. And then they started to create laws based on the knockout game. That's one of the reasons why they justified killing Mike Brown, because they said Mike Brown tried to knock out Darren Wilson. So in the minds of a white supremacist, they've been hearing knockout game, knockout game, knockout game, and then you hear about this big black guy trying to knock out a cop by running through the bullets, which is some super Negro nonsense that don't even make sense logically and physically, but they go along with that narrative. So we have to understand how propaganda works. So I will debate any of these people, but they wouldn't want to debate me. And we've never had a real conversation about race in this country. We should have a real conversation about race without all the yelling and going back and forth. Let's have a calm conversation and let's hear the people from the dominant society, hear their perspective. We'll say what we have to say without it becoming a whole woes me type of thing, because that's what we got to stop doing. Black people get in the room and we start talking about how bad we got it. I want to talk about this thing logically. Either what we're going to do is do something about this race problem, or we're going to try to keep it going on, and people who are victims of them practicing racism, we have every right to complain about it. Because we get told that we complain and we stop acting, but we are victims of white supremacy.
Yeah.
They have this thing where we know racism exists, but take responsibility. It's that nonsense.
Are you involved in politics? Like, how do you go about this? Do you feel like, I mean, I feel like you've done so much as far as the documentaries, and I think it's great. But like, what is the next step for you to actually get involved so that people can have an open, honest dialogue? Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the politicians, again, are vetted by those in the dominant society. So they do the bidding of those in the dominant society. After 1960, when we had all the civil rights movements, the people in the dominant society, they started to leave these inner cities. And once they left the inner city and took the tax money and the economic base out of these cities, then they allowed black people to be the mayors and the city council members. They let them run the cities, but they weren't really running the cities because these people weren't getting resources allocated from the state. So a lot of these cities went into decay. So they'll look at a black politician after they've drained the resources out of a city and say, look, that black politician and black people messed up Detroit. They'll start saying that. So we're going to come back in as white people and save you Negroes. And black people, not knowing the game, we will champion another group of white supremacists coming in, flooding us back into the projects, into the ghetto, into impoverishment.
Is there any, I guess, interest for you to get involved?
Only reason I get in politics, and I know a lot of politicians, and I talk to them, and even in Ferguson, I knew a lot of politicians that I work with behind the scenes, because we got this thing about jumping in front of a camera, and I always reject being a leader. People always want to put me in the black leader category, and I'm cool on that, because this is a thing that all of us needs to get involved with. We get this thing in black society where we want to push one black person out there and then root him on, like, yeah, Tariq, go on out there, you the leader, you the man, Tariq. And they'll put me out there, and it's like catch-22, because if I get something going for everybody, that's great. If they blow my brains out, it's like, oh, damn, well, I'm glad it wasn't me. It's that type of thing. Yeah. And we got a very bad problem of pushing our black people out there and not protecting them. We should have protected Malcolm X more. The people who killed Malcolm X, some of those people are still alive right now. You dig? We put our brother Martin Luther King and all those people out there. I'm cool. I have no desires to be nobody's leader. I ain't trying to get shot so they can name a street after me and then put crack out there and everybody be out there smoking on Tariq Nasheed Boulevard. Yeah. You know, I'm cool on that.
Right now. I hate you right now. I hate you right now.
And that's a trick too. That's another trick. On Martin Luther King Boulevard and Malcolm X Boulevard, the white supremacists will allow all the ratchetness to go on there. Yeah. And
it doesn't matter what state.
No, exactly.
Any state.
Exactly.
It's like this everywhere. In your opinion, why do you think Prince was, well, he's not here now. We don't know how it happened.
We don't know, but I don't believe in a coincidence that happens over and over again. I have a saying, it's the 500-year-old coincidence. Every time there's black empowerment as far as money and control, something always happens to the black people. Whenever black people build up a community that's independent of the dominant white society, it gets burned down. Wilmington, there was a thriving black community. It got burned down. Tulsa, Oklahoma, they had a thriving black community outside of the white society. They burned that down. And Overtown in Miami, they had a thriving black business district. they put a freeway over that and destroyed the district. In Minnesota, in St. Paul, they had a thriving black district. They put the freeway over that, destroyed that. It's a constant thing. When you have black artists, remember in the 1950s, and 60s, they used to rape black artists. They would just take their publishing, give them a Cadillac. Look at all those movies about black entertainers. They always come give them a Cadillac. They did that with James Brown. James Brown said, take the Cadillac back. I want my publishing. I want all this. So most black artists, when they take control of their catalog, something bad happens to them. Like Sam Cooke, he took control of his catalog, something bad happened to him. Michael Jackson took control of his catalog, something bad happened to him. Prince took control of his catalog, and a couple of years later, he just happens to die. I mean, it's too many coincidences there. Yeah. The only people who took control of their catalog and they didn't die were the black people who were crazy as hell. Yeah. Like James Brown. Yeah. Now, James Brown, he got his catalog, but James Brown rode around with a gun. Yeah. You know, so they had to lock him up. Yeah. You got to leave him alone. You got to leave James alone. And and Suge, people talk about Suge, but Suge had control of his stuff. Yeah. And Suge was about that life, so nobody was going to come run up on him like that. But they still got my brother on some other stuff. But that just goes to show, whenever we try to take control of something bad always happens, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
What do you think about Beyonce?
You're supposed to mesh your art with what's going on currently, and I respect her for that, because that's a thing that could make or kill a career, because sometimes if an artist gets too conscious, that will throw off his or her crossover base. Right. Like Marvin Gaye was on the top of his game in the 60s, early 70s, and he saw what was going on, and that brother made an album called What's Going On. Now, people didn't know how the world was going to receive that album because it was too social, it was too political, but he put himself out there on the line and put it out anyway, and that's one of his most classic albums. Amazing, yep. Amazing album. So we need artists to step out there and put it out there on the line sometimes. Michael did too. Michael had a lot of conscious songs. Yep. Now, with Beyonce, she was America's sweetheart. The minute she started talking about liking her blackness, all of a sudden you see this negative pushback against her. Right. So we have to watch out and make sure they don't harm our sister and our brother Jay-Z as well, because they're talking about owning things and controlling things. And the minute you do that, they start demonizing you. That happened with Michael. Michael was cool. He was America's sweetheart too, until Michael got them catalogs and he started making socially conscious music. All of a sudden he became Wacko Jacko. Yeah. Overnight.
Yeah, I think what Beyonce did was great.
I think so too.
I'm not really it's part of history. I'm not sure. I think it's because they were just saying, oh, it's because it was the Black Panther Party, but I think people forget why the Black Panther Party was even came around.
Right, and they try to make the Black Panther Party somehow comparative to the Klan or a white extremist group, and they were not. The Black Panthers, they didn't harm anybody. Yeah. They weren't trying to harm anybody. They had a lot of white support, and basically they were feeding children. That's the thing they really didn't like. They were getting people out of poverty by feeding them and taking care of them, and the government said, no, they have to go.
Do you feel that celebrities should be doing more?
I think we should be doing more as a whole community, because a lot of times I don't like to put that on our celebrities. Right. And to be fair to them, they should, but I don't like to put it on them though. Right. Because understand this, most black celebrities, they get their money from people in the dominant white society. And one of the prerequisites is, hey, don't get too black on us. Yeah. Because if you get too black, we're going to take that money back from you. And they know that. Just like with athletes. If athletes start making too many political moves, they'll start dwindling down on their endorsements. But I say, if all the athletes got together and said, we're going to do it anyway, like they did in the 60s. Remember, in the 1960s, the black athletes had no problem standing up and saying, hey, wait, this shouldn't go down. And as a group, we're going to stand against systematic racism. Like my brother Jim Brown, who's in Hidden Colors 4, by the way. Oh, yeah. Jim Brown is the truth, by the way. The last of the Mohicans. That's like grown-ass man.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
We need more athletes like that who are grown-ass men. Because you look at athletes now, one thing a lot of people don't notice, they always show black athletes as childlike. Yes. They always show them with their moms. They always show them dancing, hanging out with their friends like children. With white athletes, they don't do that. They always show white athletes with their wives, with their families. With black athletes, either they're with their moms or they're with their friends. They never show them with their wives.
Why do you think now they don't do this?
To really control them. It's a way to control them. It's a way to control them and let them know that you don't get too big for your britches. Don't get too political. And I think they even put that in contracts that a lot of athletes, they can't become too political. Recently, the college athletes over in Missouri, there was a school out there, and there was some racial stuff going down, and the ball players made a bold move. They said, we're not going to play unless you get rid of the president. And they had to get rid of him. And now they tried to come up with all types of ways to punish students for pulling moves like that now. So I take my hat off to them, and we have to support brothers and sisters who stand up like that, because those in the dominant society.
I was really happy for them.
I was so happy for them and proud of them. And you see, when the dominant society, when they take an L, they don't take an L lightly.
Yeah.
So they go back to the drawing board to try to revise what they need to do.
I saw a lot of different, racial conversations when Michael Strahan decided to leave the show and with Kelly Ripa. Do you have any opinions on that at all, or do you feel like, that's just a business move?
No, I saw a clip of him in some high heel boots. They had him in some. I said, "Oh my God." I said, when I saw him on television, I'm like, well, this brother he's too masculine, he's too big, he's too black. I said, they're going to do something to feminize this brother. So I'm not surprised. And I think Kelly Ripa, she was upset that he's leaving, and I think he might be getting more money. And that's the thing. Black people, when they work around those in the dominant society, the white people working with them are fine until you start making more money than them. Because, see, they like for us to be the little mascot. We're like the comic relief. We're like the pet Negro that they have. But the minute we start rising up and our star starts shining a little brighter, and then we start to get more offers and more money offers, then all of a sudden we see them getting into victim mode. So I'm looking at what's her name, Kelly Ripa. I'm looking at her talk like she's been molested or something, the way she's acting, like somebody actually did something to her.
Yeah.
So that just shows how the dominant society works in relations to us.
Before Hidden Colors and all these, I listened to your radio show. How did this happen? What made you want to start getting involved, in history and being able to put the message out?
I notice in relationships, there's always a racial undertone when it comes to relationships, because we live in a system dominated by racism. So racism is definitely going to seep its way into the way we date. And in our community, especially in the black community, we have hang-ups on how we date as far as race. Some people won't date somebody because they're too dark. You dig?
Or too light.
Too light,
right.
Or that person's not dark enough. So we get these little color complexes, and that comes from being in a system of racism. Also, my books crossed over a lot. A lot of my books, like my first few books, The Art of Mackin' and all that,
right.
A lot of white college kids would have my books, and I would get emails and messages from cats saying, "Hey, man, I got your book. Will it work for white guys?" I'm like, why wouldn't it work for white guys?
Yeah.
What kind of question is that? So I would get all these strange racial questions, and I would get these interracial dating questions where people say, I was dating this girl and her family don't like me, and I'm dating this guy, but his friends called me the N-word. So all of these racial things kept coming up. So I said, let me talk about race. Let me tackle race specifically. And that's where the Hidden Colors thing came in.
I think that's so great, though, because I think you really were able to find the root of the issue of everything that was going on, and that's it.
Yeah.
What do you think, I guess, in your opinion, when it comes to cheating, if a man cheats on a woman, do you think she should take him back?
Women, is the man worth you being cheated on? Because sometimes it's practical. Sometimes it's a practical thing to kind of work that thing out. Because look, throughout history, powerful men always had mistresses. In old kingdoms, it was known that there was a mistress. Everybody in the township knew who the mistress was, because most marriages were business arrangements. Got it? It was all about maintaining wealth, getting the wealth of one empire, patching it up with another empire. Even on slave plantations, the white slave female who lived in the house, she knew that the slave master, her husband, had black side pieces, which were really victims of rape, by the way. But going back to the old kingdoms, there's always been mistresses, and people understood the dynamic. They knew what the job of the mistress was. They knew what the job of the wife was. So I say to women, if you're in a situation where you have wealth and you have money involved and you have empires involved, and the guy has a mistress or the guy has had a few infidelity episodes, y'all can work that out if it's not too severe to the point where it's causing you some type of detriment. But if you're a woman and you dating a dude who works at Subway and he has a side chick, charge him to the game.
Now, what do you think about online dating?
Online dating should be only good for introductory purposes. For you saying, hey, my name is such and such, I live here, let's exchange numbers and hook up. That's the only purpose of online dating, for the introduction purposes. We've made online dating relationships.
Yeah.
I talk to dudes and I've said, hey, what's going on with your relationship? Like, yeah, I'm dating this chick. I've been dating her for like 3 months. I'm like, so are y'all living together? Oh, no, I never met her. We just talk on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, no.
Okay, dude. That's not a relationship. And we got people who have Twitter and Instagram relationships.
Yeah.
You can't have relationships online because relationships are based on nonverbal messages that you send. You can only send verbal messages online. You can only use verbs. So when you get around a person, what dictates your chemistry is how you guys feel around each other, the vibe that you have, the energy that you have, all of that. You have to be around a person to feel that.
I want to talk about old-fashioned type of love. Like, do you think the guy should make the move on the woman? And this is obviously for the girls who are watching that really just, look, I want something solid. I want love. I want to feel the passion. Most women that I know just want to be loved.
Right.
They just want to be, committed to.
Some they say that. They say that. Let me say that. No, because see, that's another con game too.
Yeah.
That whole innocent. I just want to be loved, and you find a dude who loves you, and then you disrespect him. You dig? Because a lot of women say they just want love, but they really want attention. And a lot of people mistake attention for love because attention is almost like a drug to women. See, an orgasm is a drug for men, but attention is like an orgasm to a woman. So a woman can get with a guy and not even get with him, but give a guy the number. And the fact that this guy is vying for her, she's satisfied with that because now she's getting attention, and now she feels like she's in demand.
Right.
So now that's a power thing. You got somebody vying for your attention, and you can block his call or delete his call or text him when you want to. That's an ego thing that a lot of women get into. So I tell guys, if you deal with a woman, make sure she wants a genuine relationship.
Exactly.
And not just somebody to boost her ego.
Do you think, though, the man shouldn't do those efforts? Like, okay, I'm going to take you out. I want to pay the bill. Because I feel like now the roles have gotten so, it's a bit clouded out here. Sometimes you're like, well, if I don't hit him up, he's not going to respond, or then it's going to show that I'm not really into him. But I just believe in the classic way of, if he wants you, he'll let you know. He'll make an effort. And I think you should obviously give it back.
But it has to be, it has to be reciprocal. Because the thing is, women say, I want a guy to open the door, to call me all the time. But the thing is, women really like a guy who's just as much as a challenge as she is.
Really?
Yes, they do. They want a guy who's a challenge. You don't want the guy who's really texting you back every minute you call him. You want a guy who you can kind of, like, what is he doing? How come he hasn't called me yet? Because that builds up intrigue. So women kind of like that because now you have to vie for his attention a little bit. And women like that challenge, especially if it's a guy who other women are checking for.
Right.
Because women love that competition. So you don't want a guy to hand it all over on a platter. Women say that, but when a dude does it, women, you don't respect them. Women will talk that talk, but they will respect the dude who they had to call and check up on a few times. You respect the dude who you might have to go to his house and look outside the door.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're crazy.
Yeah.
But I only get crazy if they're not giving me everything on the platter.
Exactly.
But that's why. Like, I'd rather not let my crazy out. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather not. I'd rather keep it stored away.
You don't, but you do. Women don't, but they do. They want a dude who makes them go a little psycho. They do. If a woman is
psycho, though.
Yeah, good psycho.
Yeah.
A woman, I always tell dudes, you're not a player unless a woman has done damage to your car. If your car has not been damaged, you're not a player yet.